All right, we'll get this started. So we will start the 11:10 meeting, the Boise Development Impact Fee at 12:25, 25 minutes late. I do apologize. Got pulled in a direction I couldn't say no, I had to be there. So we will start today's business with the minutes from October 13th. Has everyone had a chance to review that? And if so, I would ask for a motion to approve the minutes.
Corbin, I have one edit on the minutes. At the headline there across the page, it says we met on Friday, November 13th. It was actually Wednesday, November 13th. So with that edit, I would make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second the motion.
Perfect. Any discussion on that? And good catch. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No opposed, looks like. Okay. And we will move on to the next, the impact fee study and capital improvement plans, the final review, which that'll be on the parks.
Sure, so let me start my presentation here. Can you all see that?
Yes.
All right. All right, so the agenda for today is to review parks, police, and fire, not necessarily in that order. Discuss a few modifications that we made to the methodology and just kind of the underlying assumptions that were made since the last DFAC meeting. And then just to note it for the record, I wanted to make sure that everyone had received and reviewed the chair's email on his comments on the latest improvement plan.
Yes, Iris.
Yeah.
Great. So on to I figured it makes sense to break this down by department. Just makes it a little bit more manageable. So for the police 10-year CIP, no changes have been made. Honestly, probably since the summer. I think the last changes we made were some of the growth officer changes. And I think that was it. And so I guess, are there any remaining questions for police at this point?
This is Tony. Police look good to me.
I have nothing.
Okay. Hearing no others, is there a motion to recommend the police impact fee plan?
So I'm thinking you're thinking of splitting this into the three pieces, then do these individually?
Correct. That was the thought, is again, just because various pieces have had various questions on it, I figured it was easier to split it into those four sections: park, police, fire, and then the methodology. Okay.
In that case, I would make a motion to recommend section 3, which is the police department capital improvement plan and impact fee description.
Tony, can we get a second?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Michael. Any discussion on this? Hearing none, I would, everyone that approves, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any noes? Not hearing any noes, the motion passes.
Great. Thank you. On to fire. And this one, sorry if this is a little confusing. The presentation that I gave last month showed 10.4 as the cost per station, and report, as I think I pointed out at the time, showed 10.45. There was a difference just due to how much FF&E we were assuming. So the revised report from Ann reflects, as it did in the presentation, that 10.4 million. And that was the only change since our October meeting. So I guess, are there any questions for the chief or for Sean before we take a vote on this one?
I know this was the one that that Dave had some concerns on. There was a concern about the cost of the fire engines. I did just take my own look at that just to see what, if I was in the market for a Pierce Arrow, what that would cost. And those estimates that Travis had looked really close to me to what other institutions have been paying for fire engines. So I'm okay with that. The increase in level of service was one that I think Dave pointed out that was concerning to me. And so Colleen asked the question last meeting about whether we were retrofitting some of the existing fire stations to meet some of those very same standards. And I think that resolved that issue. So I'm fine with the fire report at this point.
Tony, I do recall we also had a concern just on the estimate, looking at Meridian built theirs at $656 per square foot. We're looking at $730. At this point, I don't have a concern on that. Costs have gone up. We all know that. And if we're going to over budget, I'd rather see that than under budget.
What did you think about Dave's comment about the contingency? I think Dave suggested perhaps putting the contingency fee basically in the cost estimate was kind of double dipping. I don't know. Travis, what do you think?
You know, I think one thing there is either it's, I mean, my non-legal opinion, and I'd maybe defer to Ann on this too. But if it's growth, it's growth. And I think the appropriate place to revisit this would be if we get to the project and in fact realize we do not. I mean, because, sorry, let me finish that thought before I go to the next one. And revisit once we know what the actual project cost will be. And because over 10 years, we're collecting for a project that's going to, in all reality, probably be budgeted in our fiscal year 23 at the city. So within 12 months, it's not like the collections will have soared out of control. You know, it's not like we're collecting for 9 years and in that 10th year building the station. We'd be able to adjust the plan pretty quickly. So that would be my 2 cents. And I don't know if you have thoughts on it. But again, that's just, you know, my thinking in terms of, you know, growth paying for growth versus really opining on what Dave was suggesting.
I understand what Dave was suggesting in terms of double dipping and that we will have the inflationary index in place so that we'll keep up with construction costs. I would think that the contingency might be different in that it could be a contingency in scope and not necessarily just how bids come in. So in that way, I could see that contingency being different and not captured by our annual inflationary index.
I'm sure you were hearing me nod while you said that, so that sounds all right. In that case, I would move to approve section 4, the fire department's portion of the report.
I'd like to second that.
Any discussion? I believe Colleen will give the second too. So I would like to add, there was one more thing that Dave mentioned, was the building cost for green material. There was a spirited discussion between Jill and Dave on this. And I am of the opinion that we have done other buildings that had green costs. This is the first time it came up. And a building is going to be built to meet the code. So if that isn't going to include green costs, then it should be included in the cost and paid for by impact fees in the area to meet the code. So that's where I'll end it there. Any other discussion? All right, everybody in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any noes? Not hearing any? We have a pass. On to the next.
All right, on to parks, where there were a couple of cleanup changes. So I'll actually get to the one with Alta Harris last. So we increased funding for Veterans Park to 660 from 262, which I realize is a not small increase, but that's just, and Jennifer or Trevor might be able to elaborate on this one. But just based on preliminary estimates, now that we're starting to work towards getting bids on it, because this is this calendar year, or sorry, this fiscal year project. Just the costs are going to be wildly in excess of the 262 that was in the 2016 plan. And then on Franklin Park, it was just literally a computational error that was amounted to a $5,000 adjustment. And then finally on Alta Harris, we've removed the local parks portion and reduced the regional park cost from 2 million to 1.2. And the reason for that is at this point, there's a lot of ongoing questions about the funding sources for this project, when it's going to happen and who's going to pay for it. And so we thought starting to collect on a project that we don't have a high level of confidence in our cost, timing, et cetera, made sense to only put in what we know, which is the regional cost, and then wait for a subsequent update, not necessarily the 5-year update, but a 1 or 2 year out update to the plan to start capturing these costs. And reducing Alta Harris, or removing the Alta Harris portion, because it reduced the acreage, reduced the amount of vehicle costs that we're collecting for growth by about $50,000 too. And there was 2 other projects that nothing's changed, just flagging them because they could be more expensive than what's currently in the plan. One is Stewart Gulch, that just continues to evolve with how to get water to the park site, and Pine Grove, similar to Veterans, where it's just costs are going up, and what we budgeted even just a year ago is looking to be inadequate. So with that, I guess, are there any questions for Jennifer?
Hey, Travis, Corbin, question for Jennifer or for Travis. Last month, there was a discussion of reducing part of the amount of money going to Molinar Park. Did anything further happen with Molinar Park as far as funding is concerned?
Sorry, just give me 1 second. I thought that the discussion there was just that the city was picking up a portion of that, but I apologize if I just missed that feedback from last week, or from last month, sorry.
No, I thought it was as a way to like offset costs somewhere else. Maybe I'm mistaken. I don't know, Corbin, Colleen, Tony.
I'm as you mentioned that, I was looking back, I'm not sure I remember that.
Okay,
I can't recall either.
all right. Well, then I will withdraw my question.
Travis, I wanted to look a little more deeply at the southeast region. If we pull so if the city has decided to pull Alta Harris out of the southeast, then effectively there are no projects on the CIP in the next 10 years for the southeast part. I'd hate for us to get into the situation where we have a 10-year, sort of 5-year at least impact fee structure with nothing in that region. So 2 parts of this. Question number 1, what's the balance in the southeast account. Two, if it is likely that we're going to be doing anything parks-wise in the southeast, is the city prepared to fund all of that not using impact fees, given that we're not going to be collecting them?
So to answer the first question, the Southeast is currently, excuse me, I think it's overdrawn by about $500,000. And then to answer your question, it's not that there's a decision yay or nay either way on Alta Harris. It's just open-ended in terms of who, how, and when is going to be paid for. And so because of that, we didn't want to be collecting for something that we can't definitively say we're going to do at some point. That said, and again, I defer to Trevor or Jennifer if they want to chime in here, but I believe that there will be much greater clarity within the next 12 months. And so I would not imagine us waiting until another 5-year update to start collecting if indeed a local park's being put down here, that we'd want to get back in front of y'all as quickly as possible, exactly for that reason. So we're not collecting, kind of artificially reduced fees for any longer than necessary until we can, once we have positively identified, here's the project, here's the estimated cost, and here's how much we need to collect in impact fees. Sorry, did my rambling answer your question?
Yes, I have an answer. I'm still not entirely thrilled about it. The development in the southeast portion of the valley, the Barber Valley, is going to happen in the next year to year and a half. Homes are springing up out there like mushrooms. And if we the next year to year and a half, and then we look a year and a half, 2 years down the road, looking at the projections in the report for development in the southeast part of the city, I just don't see that there will be things to assess impact fees on 2 years down the road if we decide that's when we're going to collect impact fees for such a park.
I think that the one, and again, defer to Trevor and Jennifer, but I think the other thing is there is another regional park that's going in that area. Sorry, let me just pull up the sheet here. It's it's the Sioux Howell is down in that area. So again, it's not that we're saying that the area is perfectly parked and doesn't need anything else. It's just the classification of the other park that would go in for sure, according to the CIP, and 10 years would be in that area, just classified as a regional. But that still doesn't address your question of collecting for local parks, but it does hopefully somewhat address your question of, are we going to be needing a lot more local parks in this area?
Well, if we're not collecting for a period of time, what amount are we forgoing of fees that we could have collected?
It depends obviously on the rate of new home construction in the area, and whatever the final costs are for whatever, if any, park is going in there. So I apologize, I can't give you a definitive answer, but just looking back to last month's plan, looks like the southeast fees would have been about $1,500 per person. And that was based on, I believe, 4.2 or 4.8 million of local park for local park fees for Alta Harris.
Corbin, Travis, sorry, maybe I missed it. Can you can you kind of explain why that got cut out?
Yes, so again, it's just the uncertainty. I mean, so there's obviously we could have gone two ways. One was, despite the uncertainty, start collecting fees for precisely some of the reasons that were just mentioned, just so we're collecting over time. Worst case, you're paying off the negative balance from, some of the recent parks like Bowler, which is the reason why we're overdrawn currently. So we could have done that or pulled it out until we know more. So we're not collecting fees for something that, is, I don't want to say that the project is more uncertain than it is, but just there are a lot of question marks around it. And so rather than collecting for that for a year while we figure it out, we thought it would be more conservative to not be collecting for it for a year. And then come back once we have greater certainty.
So what is the plan for the negative balance? We're not collecting.
So that is the remaining fee for the Southeast.
So, okay. Still charging a fee, just not as much. Okay,
Correct.
gotcha.
Corbin, I have one more comment on this.
Yes.
I'm going to recommend you add this back to the CIP, Travis. We've got in the CIP, you've got Alta Harris regional amenities under the regional. You've got the Eckert Greenbelt underpass. You're putting two things in the CIP that are related to Alta Harris Park. We need to build the third. This is a three-pronged park. We should put all three of them in the CIP.
Can I add to Tony's question? Is there a negative to putting it back in the CIP? I guess I recognize there's some uncertainty, but feel like I'm still at a little bit of a loss for what the uncertainty is, and I tend to agree with Tony about the three-prong approach. So I apologize. I think I'm missing the uncertainty around it, and Tony, I agree with you.
No, I think, look, ultimately, I'm just a reporter of the current situation, but there are possibilities that, like the CID and Harris Ranch could contribute costs. So it's largely, again, the source of the funding that is the question. And to a certain extent, I think the scale and scope of the park itself. But again, we thought it was being conservative to exclude the park. But if y'all's inclination is to put it back in, we can do that. Or the other thing is, we can commit to revisiting this, within a year once we have greater certainty, so that we know that it's not, well, we'll get to it when we get to it, but it's date certain that we're revisiting this topic and adding it or not, depending on what we know, 1 year hence.
So the issue right now is Parks feels the money could be coming from somewhere else, and we do not want to be collecting impact fees for something that funding could be elsewhere. So that basically the gist of it.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And I do like the idea of waiting a year then to revisit this, if it is of the professional opinion of Parks that the money most likely would be coming from somewhere else, which seems to be the case if you're willing to pull it out of the CIP.
And I don't want to put Parks on the spot.
Wow.
I don't want to make the representation that there's a viewpoint either way, but it's just because there isn't a viewpoint either way. Again, we thought it was prudent to pull the costs rather than include them when we really are uncertain about it.
which then goes into why pull it, because then we could be in an issue in a year where we haven't been collecting and we need the money.
Does Parks want to add anything? That's just a question. I leaned over and looked at Jennifer for that to see if she has any comments on this.
I'm not really aware of uncertainty in the cost. We actually bid this project last year. So we know even to green it up, we're looking at least $3 million. And then I actually have pretty good numbers for all the amenities in this park as well. So if there are varying opinions on different contributions that may be coming in, I am not party to those discussions. I would though like to point out that I believe with the town square in Harris Ranch coming online in the next 18 months, with about 800 apartment units, that would create quite a issue in the collection practices if we were to leave this out.
Corbin, that's exactly my fear, that if we delay a year, we set a date certain to look at it, we have missed the window for collections in the southeast. The very people who are going to be utilizing the park will not have been the ones that have paid for that growth. It's going to fall on the rest of the people in the city to do it.
That's exactly my thought.
Which is fair. Someone's going to get out of paying what everyone else has been paying. And
Right.
And that would kind of set a precedent that I don't know that we want to set, and other areas of the community, I think, would be upset at one area not having to do what they've done.
And still effectively getting a big park, because if we've done
Exactly.
we've done the green belt, we've done 2 out of the 3 prongs of Alta Harris.
Just a thought, would it address these concerns if we kind of take a multi-pronged approach, which is one, put in the $3 million that and we'll refine the cost, because I don't know if it was exactly $3 million on the nose, but whatever that green up cost was, include that in the plan today so that we're collecting, as soon as this plan gets approved. 2, commit to within the next 12 to 18 months, revisit this particular park, the funding thereof, the cost thereof, and the timing thereof, and revisit how much we should be collecting, and if needed, adjust the fees for the Southeast accordingly. And I guess the last prong to that is, based on ultimate funding sources, we would adjust the amount of impact fees we're collecting, obviously, but that might provide a little bit of kind of compromise right now. So to everyone's point, we're not missing potentially a year of collections that could be big collections. Because considering I think a green up would be obviously the first step here at a minimum,
Corbin, can I address that?
yes.
Is there a reason why we wouldn't just go back to what we had in October?
I guess we could also do that with perhaps the same caveat, right? That we'll address it once there's greater certainty.
I'd feel more comfortable with that.
And I think that the one thing, just to keep on our radar was just how high the fees were. And granted, it's for an area that would have a great park, but it was the highest per person impact fee for local parks in the city. So that was another concern.
And what specifically led to that being significantly higher than other areas?
I think it was just, and Anne can speak to the math of it, but I think it was just the relative cost and scale of the park relative to the projected growth.
It's not that different. I mean, I think in October we had Southeast at 1,500, Southwest at 1233, West Bench at 1207. North River, there's not as much in the plan, and Central Bench, there's not as much in the plan. So those larger, perhaps growing faster areas, yeah, it's just if we didn't put, 4.8 million in each of them equally, I think that amount for Alta Harris was just slightly higher or was being divided by slightly less growth depending on, and yes, that I don't know how fast we'll build out in the Southeast, but.
But to that point, we can reach out to the developer and find out the actual unit count that they are planning on bringing online in the next year and bring that information back to you, if that would be helpful in making your decision.
I would believe that the growth projections that I put in originally that came from Compass, probably pretty accurate to the build out of the PUD or the special use plan in Harris Ranch.
Yes, I mean, I guess, look, we can do obviously whatever the committee recommends. So I think at this point, the questions are, do we go back to what was in there last month for Alta Harris? Do we do that for both regional and local? Because like I said, there are questions, and the issue becomes like, do you reflect those open questions or issues, concerns with a reduced dollar amount, so we're not collecting all of it up front? I mean, obviously we're not collecting it all, it's over 10 years, but we're not setting a fee day one based on costs that are uncertain and could be overstated. Or do we kind of split the difference and go with something that's closer to just the green up costs? And I'm agnostic, just whatever the committee recommends.
Corbin, a comment?
I want to see what's fair for everybody. And at this point, sounds like there's a lot of questions how we move forward. So moving back to October where we last saw it, and then going forward and getting more information sounds prudent at this point.
Tony, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, the reason we're in this boat right now is because we undercollected in the last period and we couldn't build Alta Harris the last time we did it. I don't want to be in that same boat 5 years down the road, thinking we've underbid for the southeast part and Alta Harris is still not done. I'm much more comfortable reverting back to the amount that was in, though I do know it increases significantly, the development impact fee for the southeast. But I think that gives some certainty that this park gets done.
Okay.
Tony, do you want to make a motion for that to get added?
That's an excellent idea. I think I will. I would recommend we approve the park's 10-year CIP with the one caveat that the Alta Harris development portion be returned to what it was in our October DIFAC meeting, and the impact fees reflect that change.
I second that.
Any discussion?
Just a point of clarification, sorry. Is that for regional and local, or are you only focused right now on making sure we're capturing that local portion? Because there was like an $800,000 difference on the regional as well.
As the maker of the motion, my concern is not with the regional park, it is only with my concern is not with the regional park, it is only with the local park, with the portion attributable to the southeast.
Can we get another second on that with the ad? Just local.
Second that one too.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I,
Aye. Any nays? All right, motion is passed. That.
Great, thank you. On to the ultimate topic, and as in last, not the most important. So in our meeting last month, there was a couple of things that we talked about when it came to the methodology. One of the things that we talked about was the 5 persons in the largest size category. Could we combine the top 2 size categories? And then the other thing that wasn't discussed in the meeting, it was discussed in a prior meeting, was at one point we'd gone from about 32% up to like a 52% multifamily development over 10 years. And looking at the actual, and that was based on some information that Dave had provided, Chair Jorgensen had provided on permits. But when we went back and actually looked at what the city had been pulled in the city over the last 5 years, it averaged about 42%. The 1-year sample that I pulled to come up with all these allocations across the various size categories also worked out to about 42%. So, the chair did address this in his comments too, that he was okay with this, but moving that multifamily split down to 42%, which obviously changes this total size growth that we have across the city, which changes the square foot per person. And then that gets into, the discussion we had last week, which is coming up with new, possibly new size categories, and for certain more or different persons per household assumptions. So the issue with the 1 person per household that we talked about in the small size category is that it resulted in a lot of people in the largest size category, just to keep the square foot per person constant. So this methodology, it's just pure math that says we're growing by 23.1 million square feet. We have a population growth of 30,000 people, and that means it's roughly 756 square foot per person, which does result in slightly less than 1 person per ADU, but it gets us a lot closer to 1 than we were before. And the other advantage of doing this is it takes that larger size category down to below 5 people per household, as opposed to the, I think 5.72 that we were at before. And it's still based on, again, the build permits that we saw over the last year, plus or minus 2.5%, it's going to result in full population growth capture. In other words, we'll be collecting enough impact fees relative to the population growth. And just to give you a slide that'll make your head spin, just to quickly walk through this. So this is the current methodology up top. And you can see that the square foot per person inconsistent. The persons per household is a relatively tight band, but it also has that 0.63 per in the ADU size units. What we discussed last month made the square foot per person consistent, set the least number of peoples per household at 1, but that resulted in going up to 5.7 for the largest categories. And the interesting thing is, and the chair pointed this out in some email correspondence that I had with them between meetings, is that these larger units really don't get that much utilization. And I forget if it might have been, I forget if it was the chair or if it was Corbin last month had suggested, well, could we just shrink that largest unit? And so I ran a bunch of numbers and came up with this boxed bit down at the bottom, which basically just takes every size range. So we keep 5 categories Each one is in 700 square foot increments. And like I said, the square foot per person remains constant because it's just the total square foot divided by the population growth. It gives you very close to one person in an ADU, and it gives you a significant reduction versus what we were looking at last time at the 5.7. It gets you down to 4.81 in the largest units. So that was the change in methodology. And again, I'd say it's more of a tweak based on our discussions last week versus a change. But are there any questions on this part of the impact fee plan?
Any questions from the committee? Can you go back to the first page, please? That just got us
Sure.
back to that 756.
This one?
Yep. So, I mean, in the end, that's the number that's going to be scrutinized by people. And I do feel there's a good reason it got to it. The growth of how many square feet we're building divided by population growth. I mean, I feel that's fair. Obviously, you'll probably find some people that could go, oh, you should have done it a better way, but find a way. And I think that is a good, fair way. I also like that it fixes our issues on the next page. The numbers do look consistent and what we would more expect. I would still like personally to see one in under the 700 foot. But it's a concession and I understand why we're there. So it definitely looks better than 0.63, which causes a lot of questions. We are close to one person. So yes, I've had good work in my opinion.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions?
All right. Guess we will move for a motion. We can go to the next page. We can
Yes.
ask for one.
Is there a motion to recommend the changes to the methodology that I just discussed? Crickets.
This is Tony. I would make a motion rather to approve the methodological changes to the impact fee plan. They make sense. And though it is a linear model, which may be unrealistic in some aspects, this is not part of the motion, but I'll clarify the motion in just a minute. Actually, I should make a motion, then I can make a comment. My motion is to approve the methodological changes to the impact fee plan.
Thank you, Tony. Can I get a second?
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion?
Commenting on that, it is certainly defensible to have sort of a linear model. The 756 feet per square foot per person seems reasonable. You could make a logical argument that we ought to be following something more like a logarithmic model. The populations really fit that method a little bit better, but given that we have to choose a methodological choice, I think this one is defensible and I like it.
Thank you, Tony. And I will agree with you. I think it is defensible. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. All right.
Great. So, and I'll put Mary on the spot. And I apologize because I should have discussed this with her beforehand. Since we've approved all the components, do we need to have a final motion that just says, okay. Sorry, for the record, she shook her head no.
You are just fine.
Okay,
All right.
great. Well, that was all I had. I appreciate very much everyone's help over the last, feels like it's been longer, but I think it's only been 5 or 6 months to get here. Much appreciated. The questions help make it a better plan. So we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for your work.
Corbin, I just had a comment for Ann real quick. Ann, there are a couple of typos that are insignificant in terms of content. Do you want me to just send you an email on those?
Yes, please. I
I will do
appreciate you not broadcasting them live.
I will do that. They're insignificant, but it'd look pretty if they were removed, so I'll put it.
I go for pretty. Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So do we have to, move on to committee updates? I don't have.
Jennifer's shaking her head that she has no updates, so.
Well, then I believe that finishes up our meeting today. Can I get a move to adjourn?
I made a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, we are adjourned.